Support WrestleTalk!
What is going on with Seth Rollins and The Fiend? Hello and welcome to WrestleTalk. It's a review edition of Raw where we're trying out something new. This is a very YouTube format. I'm talking directly to the camera like a vlogger. I'm such a millennial. And I'm also going to be talking about how WWE Raw has really built on all the positives from last week, although that was a pretty rubbish show, but they have a really solid roster now. NXT call-ups, getting matches, and being featured on main roster programming and looking strong. It's very exciting stuff. I'm Ollie Davis, of course. Please press the thumbs up button, give us a subscribe, and leave us a comment, not only giving what you thought of Raw, but also your thoughts on this whole new format. So I guess this will kind of be like the old Raw in about 4 minutes video, but because I have no conception of time, it's probably gonna be more about 10. Here is WWE Raw, 21st of October, 2019, in about 10 minutes, I guess? But actually, before we get onto that, WWE 2K20 came out today. Let's check in over at WWE 2K20 and see what's going on. Yes, that is Charlotte putting a figure 8 on, and the referee kind of glitching his crutch into her face, and then, well done, 2K20. Well done. It's rather hypnotizing, I can't stop watching it actually. Because of 2K20 launching, Laurie and Simon are going to be playing through WWE 2K20, their career mode, a universe mode, just random matches on our new Twitch channel. So go over to Screenstalker's Twitch channel, the link's in the video description below, and subscribe there, because we'll be having Let's Plays of that going up every day for the next month. It's 2K20 month. For better or worse, we're probably just going to laugh at the game all the time. But this was the first episode with the new roster in place. First non-draft episode of WWE Raw in the new era, I suppose, the new era volume 5.6/A, of course. And to showcase that new roster of new talent and stars, they brought out and opened on Ric Flair. Woo! And also Sue. Saudi Arabia has so much money, they can even make Flair's legal costs go away. But at least there's a storyline justification for this, because Flair needed to reveal the last person on Team Flair for the Crown Jewel match against Team Hogan, and it turned out to be the Scottish psychopath, Drew McIntyre. And he said that he's going to give us a preview of what it's going to be like at Crown Jewel. Remember, you can't say Saudi Arabia, it's always Crown Jewel. And this was for a match against Ricochet with Ric Flair watching on at ringside, where he said he's going to see Hogan on Friday. Totally forgot where he was at that moment, and then also where Friday's episode of SmackDown was, and then just said, SmackDown! Woo! Ricochet and Drew here actually had an incredible opener which went through multiple commercial breaks, went about 20 minutes over all of TV time. There were some really impressive spots, particularly when he did this really nice spot where he tried to get Drew up for a Death Valley driver. The crowd went crazy like they're about to see the second coming of Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant, but then he just couldn't get him up. Drew bounced off the ropes, came back, and Ricochet just picked him up, jumped into a Death Valley driver, immediately runs up to the top rope, shooting star press. It was a great sequence and the crowd went crazy for it. But Drew, being the evil heel that he is, took Ricochet outside, threw him really hard against the ring post, which is kind of the way to protect Ricochet in this loss, then hit the Claymore, such a protected move, and he got the win. And then for added heel points, Drew took Ricochet out of the ring and continued to beat him up with an Alabama slam onto the steel steps. What was just a bit askew here is that Ricochet is in a larger team, he's in Team Hogan, because some of Hogan's best friends are superheroes, but nobody came out here to help him. We would have expected at least one person on his team to come out. The other stuff to build to Crown Jewel included a quick recap of the Saudi Arabia opening parade, which looked like some nightmarish vision into some dystopian future where Undertaker rules the earth. Then we got into what was really the really great part of Raw, and it built on last week's draft pick and how Paul Heyman has amassed a roster that is incredibly exciting. Buddy Murphy, Cedric Alexander, Ricochet, Andrade, Aleister Black. Unfortunately, it didn't really get off with a bang, because Aleister Black took on a guy called Jason Reynolds, the sort of guy when you look at him, you go, yeah, you're definitely losing. Unfortunately, Reynolds here got a bit too much offense in for me. And that's saying something because the match went like 2 minutes and it was only a few punches. But I don't really think Aleister Black should be selling at all. He should just be dodging, sitting down cross-legged, looking cool, and then hitting the Black Mass. But it's not just Andrade, Buddy Murphy, Ricochet, Aleister Black, and all those wrestlers who've been mistreated this last year or so as NXT call-ups. It seems that part of Heyman's push is to, and this is a novel concept, get everyone over. Because next up, we had a match between Andrade and Sin Cara. Sin Cara hasn't been around a whole lot recently. In fact, his last feud was on SmackDown with Andrade. But he got injured, he had knee surgery, he's been out for about a year. He managed to make it back for that 51-man Battle Royal in Saudi Arabia at the greatest Battle Royal Rumble. I forget what all the pay-per-views in Saudi Arabia are called, which means it was totally worth it. Sin Cara got a lot in here, and crucially, he got over with the crowd as well. It's not like Sin Cara getting on a load of offense against Andrade, like the Aleister Black match just now, is harming Andrade. If anything, it raises Sin Cara and Andrade, like this rising tide elevates all ships, or whatever that saying is. But really continuing this build on new talent, it then cuts backstage to Humberto Carrillo, a name that I'm only 90% confident in pronouncing out loud. And he's got these beautiful dimples. Oh, he's so cute. And he said to Charlie Caruso that one day he's going to be Universal Champion, and he'll be a good champion, unlike one that plays with fire with Seth Rollins. It was a really nice line and foreshadowed what happened later. And kind of crowning off this new focus on NXT call-up talent, the Viking Raiders, who are the new Raw Tag Team Champions, remember, took on Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. It was a fun match. It was mostly a spot fest for the Viking Raiders to still get over all their moveset, and they beat Hawkins and Ryder, surprisingly. I'm unsure about squash matches in this day and age, though, because Aleister Black, this match here, arguably the Ortiz and Santana match on AEW last week, it doesn't seem like they connect with the crowd as much as they used to in the 80s and early 90s, which was a huge part of getting over wrestlers. On paper it still is, but for whatever reason, the crowd aren't as into them these days as they used to be. There was some 24/7 title shenanigans. R-Truth's walking backstage. One of the Bollywood boys came up to him and started talking about how he's a Bollywood star. It was, not very funny, and then the other Bollywood boy rolled him up. I can't be bothered to check which Bollywood boy did the rolling up and the distraction, and they're the new 24/7 champions. Unfortunately, not all of Paul Heyman's stuff is good, and this was the absolute worst it has been since this storyline started, and that is the Rusev, Lana, and Bobby Lashley storyline. There was a King's Court segment here, where Jerry Lawler got to be in the ring with some regal-looking thrones that were never sat on. King Corbin's there somewhere being like, hey, wait a minute. That's gimmick infringement. And Rusev comes down to talk to Jerry, sort of dressed in this white shirt and trousers and the mustache. Oh yeah, that mustache. His clothes and demeanor just gave off the impression that he doesn't care. Jerry Lawler tries to talk to him, and the crowd actually start doing the what treatment because they're not invested in this storyline. It's stupid. But Rusev ingeniously shuts them down. He says, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's no way to treat a Hall of Famer, and puts his hand on Jerry's shoulder. And the crowd stopped. It was a brilliant move from Rusev. Unfortunately, that's where his passion kind of stopped. He had a little moment of fury where he said, I'm gonna beat up Bobby Lashley, but then he went into his character motivation, which is essentially, Bobby Lashley is poisoning Lana's mind. I still wear this wedding band because I believe that Lana is going to get back with me one day. For this to work even slightly, Rusev needs to be furious at everyone. He's going to beat up Lashley, going to be angry a bit at Lana, and he says that he's going to track them down where they're at in this fancy restaurant, which apparently Lana's always wanted to go to, but Rusev never took her there, but Bobby's taken her there, and it just so happens to be down the road from this week's episode of Raw. So later on, Bobby and Lana have been sitting in this restaurant for an hour now, and haven't eaten, don't know if they've ordered. And Rusev comes in, the manager runs away, and he has a brawl with Bobby while Lana just shouts incomprehensibly in the background. This was a very limp pull-apart brawl, and this whole thing lacks believability, it lacks fire, and it just feels like Rusev and Lana's way to ride out their contracts until they're expired and they can just leave the company. I don't feel like either one of them is into this storyline at all. Rey Mysterio's segment, however, was a good idea. It unfortunately just didn't hit the home run that I think it needed to. In the last couple of years, Rey Mysterio really has had an in-ring resurgence, but what I never really thought about was how good he's gotten on promos. I don't think of Rey Mysterio as a great promo guy, but in the last couple of weeks, he has been outstanding. And this was all here to build, that SmackDown feud between Cain Velasquez and Brock Lesnar, brand split, where Rey says that Cain will beat that bastard Lesnar, and then Shelton Benjamin interrupted Mysterio. So Benjamin comes down. He looked awesome, by the way. And he's cutting this really naturalistic promo against Rey, and Rey's interrupting him, they're talking over each other. Shelton's like, Brock's my boy, I trained Brock, which is true, they came up together back in the OVW days. And then Cain Velasquez's music hits. I don't really know what his music is, I just know that it's Cain because the Titantron says Cain in big letters. And he walks down, he gets in the ring, and I'm like, this is a good segment. These two are going to go up against each other. But unfortunately, the offense didn't really work. Cain kind of picked Shelton up twice in a takedown move, which looked quite clumsy, and then locked in a sleeper, and Shelton Benjamin rolled out the ring. Didn't really have the impact. Also, just a shout out to Vic Joseph. When Cain Velasquez came down, he billed Cain as the only person to legitimately claim to have manhandled Brock Lesnar. So anyone else who's ever manhandled Brock Lesnar in wrestling hasn't done so legitimately. Sorry, Seth. Sorry, Roman, but you were competing in a predetermined fake sport. Now we get to the Seth Rollins versus Bray Wyatt stuff, and what on earth is going on there? So Seth's having an interview segment with Charlie Caruso backstage where he's meant to explain his actions from last week about burning down the Firefly Funhouse. And Seth talks about how he did it to get into Bray's head. And then he said, well, I did find my way into Bray's head. I got into the Firefly Funhouse after all. Yeah, okay, yeah. It was actually a complete construct within Bray's mind. And yeah, I did just find it and walk into it and burn it down. Everything you saw in the last closing angle of Raw last week was actually a metaphor for Bray's fragile state. Nothing ever happened. It was just me incepting him. I was mind effing him. In fact, that was just the visual representation. WWE have this whole department that can capture dreams, and it was actually just Seth and Bray sitting next to each other with big dream capturing helmets on, and they had a war in their minds. WWE, or at least the powers that be in WWE, don't understand the Fiend and Bray Wyatt and the Firefly Funhouse's relationship. And those consistencies are now mudded. But no fear, even though Seth Rollins burnt down the Firefly Funhouse last week, it was announced that the Firefly Funhouse will be returning on SmackDown this Friday. It'll be interesting to see whether there will be any sort of fire damage, smoky walls and stuff, whether Bray's going to address it. He'll have to. Bray's approach to his own gimmick at least tries to make sense of all the inconsistencies WWE drop in there. So Seth's talking about the Fiend and everything with Charlie Caruso, and he catches Humberto Carrillo's eye, who sort of took that shot at him through that shade earlier on in the show. And Seth goes over to him and says, look, dimply face, I had to burn down the Firefly Funhouse. Welcome to Raw, by the way. Why don't me and you have a match tonight? Not only was this a great way of getting Carrillo over, it was a fantastic way to make me like Seth Rollins again. It was Seth Rollins versus Carrillo. It happened almost immediately after this. And Seth gave Humberto loads of offense. He managed to get over his athletic style, lots of lucha, lots of wrestling, arm drags, moonsaults, dives. But Seth never looked out of control. And he worked a bit heelish, and he was talking trash. It was a much more effective way to show how the Fiend is affecting Seth's mental state, that he is slipping into a sort of darker persona. And Carrillo just isn't a baby face, like a literal baby face. Look at those dimples. He's 23 years old. That is youth. And it's something quite rare in WWE. When people are that young, they tend to just send them to NXT, they work there for 10 years, and then they're called up and by the time they get to the main roster, they're in their early 30s. And all those young, promising stars that we were talking about for this Raw roster, Aleister Black is 34, Buddy Murphy is 31, Andrade is 29, Humberto, by comparison, is 23. And that is a hugely important draw that WWE need to focus on. If AEW are coming up with genuinely young talent like Darby Allin and Jungle Boy, you need your own genuinely young talent. Not just like a high school movie where you look at all the actors and you're like, nope, you're 30, you're 29, you're about mid-40s. You want wrestlers playing that babyface role who are actually of a young age to connect with that younger audience. So Seth wins, he goes over strong. There's not any Fiend angle here, but they did announce that the Falls Count Anywhere match, this is on the match graphic, there's a quotation bit that says, can't be stopped for any reason. That's now part of the stipulation. It's not just a Falls Count Anywhere match, it's a Falls Count Anywhere match that can't be stopped for any reason. WWE have put so much distrust in their audience, they have to qualify the stipulation. That should be the default setting for these sorts of stipulations. You should expect that the match will finish clean. Interestingly, the match after Raw, the dark match, was Seth Rollins going up against Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, in a steel cage. And yes, they flooded the stage with the red lighting again, unfortunately. And at Carlos Toro 360 has shared some of that footage on social media, and you can see and hear that Seth is getting booed tremendously again. It's the same sort of structure where it's just Seth stomp, super kick, and then he walks out of the cage door to win. But the main event of the evening, and quite rightly so, was the OC versus the Street Profits. What I thought was a six-man tag, that everyone sort of thought was a six-man tag, that WWE arguably even promoted themselves was a six-man tag in all of their graphics. The fact that the OC are of three men, AJ Styles, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, and the Street Profits are only two, and they kept talking about how they had to get a mystery partner and how all of their backstage promos throughout the night were, oh yeah, we've got a mystery partner sorted. It's someone with history with AJ Styles. You don't want to miss who this mystery partner's gonna be. So they just wrestled what I thought was a 2-on-3 handicap match, which is usually how the psychology works, because then the mystery partner will make that babyface run in and save at the end. But that isn't what happened. It actually just became a weird 2-on-2 match. It was very, very clunky and it didn't work. And I think that affected the crowd because the crowd weren't as into this as they should have been. The Street Profits are really, really good in there. And it was an exciting match. But the crowd were kind of sitting on their hands because I think they're all waiting for this mystery partner to arrive. Then AJ Styles was interfering at ringside. The referee was like, no, you get out of here. And that's when the mystery partner, but not actually a partner, came out. It's Kevin Owens. It's Kevin Owens, which is exciting. I love Kevin Owens. In all the interviews he did after the draft, he didn't particularly want to be on Raw, but he's here now, so he's gonna make the best of it. Kevin Owens versus AJ. They did not have a good feud last time over the United States title. Disappointing match after disappointing match, and even a botched finish where the US title was not meant to switch hands, but it did because AJ didn't kick out. Owens hits the stunner, and then the Street Profits get the win in the ring, and they come off like total stars. They're celebrating everywhere, they run into the crowd, and brilliantly, Montez Ford, while they're in the crowd, snatches a baby. There's this baby dressed up as Hulk Hogan, and he's carrying it and celebrating. The baby is looking at Montez Ford's face like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. The mum that the baby was grabbed from is standing there. She's wearing an I Did It for The Rock t-shirt. Oh, the smark is strong in this family. What a kid that's gonna turn out to be. And that's how Raw goes off air, with Montez Ford holding a baby dressed as Hulk Hogan because some of Hulk Hogan's best friends are Street Profits. It was a really fun way to end Raw, and the cherry on top of a night that was built around focusing and creating new stars, which is very similar to what AEW have been doing. Sin Cara, Aleister Black, Ricochet, Drew McIntyre, the Street Profits, AOP, the Viking Raiders. Unfortunately, they do have this hangover of Seth and the Fiend. But overall, I really enjoyed this episode of Raw. The Rusev stuff was terrible. The Seth and Fiend stuff is pretty hokey and not that good, but Seth was good. And Montez Ford ended the show holding a baby dressed as Hulk Hogan. So this week's Raw, I'm going to give a core. Let me know what you all thought of the show and this new format. Hopefully it hasn't gone too long. For recording time, I'm now on 45 minutes. I probably should have said Raw in about 23 minutes. But remember, press the thumbs up button, give us a subscribe because it really helps the channel, and press this video that's just appeared to my left to see what's happening with Randy Orton, who has teased a move to AEW. It could be a tease, but it also could very likely be Randy Orton's contract is coming up soon and he's playing both sides against each other. So click that, check that out, give us a subscribe, leave a comment. I've been Ollie Davis, and that was wrestling.